Welcome to the ERP Seal podcast. My name is Tim Rodman. Today is August 7th, Friday, August 7th, 2026. And this is episode number, actually, I don't even remember, 182. We got Ryan Goodman and also put, actually, I'm not even going to worry about it today. You can find related links for the episode at erpseal.com/episode 182. And we're here in Ryan's super cool office. I wish we could pan around, but I don't want to show all your cool stuff here, but we got a really cool setup, and we're in person here in San Diego to talk about semantic models and why they matter in the world of AI. Ryan, thanks for having me out to your spot here in San Diego.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out to the workshop. It's a legitimate workshop, but it's where I spend all my time. No working from home. This is where I wake up and come in and build, right?
Definitely a builder feel here, crafter, builder, maker, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And I think that type of personality fits well with the data person, would you say?
Yeah. Well, and it's like ADD fuel also. So
yeah, it works too. I think there's a correlation there between that and data people as well.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into the semantic model stuff and the AI stuff, maybe just give us, I always like asking people, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And in your case, how'd you get into the world of data and BI, dashboards, all that stuff?
Yeah. I grew up actually in Arizona. Went to school in Arizona. Even though we have the Duke, I'm a diehard Duke fan. So you have the Duke paraphernalia back there. There's actually a whole wall. Didn't have the grades, so I was in Arizona. But went to school in Arizona. Started like anyone in the data space, 20 something years ago. You just kind of fall into it. You have a love for problem solving and using data. We started in Excel, like most of us, and always been technology inclined. Built websites and built Adobe Flash apps, big into data visualization, and kind of landed in the world of BI, having like a corporate type of job doing data analysis, and
just like in-house.
Just in-house.
Okay.
So I started as an analyst, clicking around in Excel, and I had a leader put a book in front of me, the Tufte book, what is it? The Visual Display of Quantitative Information.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm gonna keep notes on my phone's over there. I usually keep related links. Okay, there's a related link flag. Okay.
Yeah, so I have like a first or second edition floating around here, but basically it was
Edward, is that his first name?
Edward Tufte.
Edward Tufte. Yeah.
Yeah. So at that point there was no like analytics courses in college. If you wanted to learn about BI, what we now call BI, decision support, there was like 2 books, and so he put this book in front of me. And that kind of changed everything, right? Around how do you take data, how do you visualize it? And then I was part of that first wave of BI, business objects. I'm a former business objects guy, through an acquisition where I ran around the world teaching people like what is a dashboard and like how's it going to change everything.
Working for business objects.
Working for a startup, then getting acquired by business.
Oh, okay, interesting. So you did come in the training side, or pretty early on you were on the training side. You definitely kind of have that, I don't know, inclination, passion, or what you want to call it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, training people, doing implementations, fixing problems. But that was like my entry point into BI was as an analyst. I was building really cool stuff. I came here to San Diego. I showed the CEO the cool stuff I was building. He's like, hey, you should come out here and join us. So I went from being an analyst and building stuff inside of a company to becoming part of the tech wave that kind of created this dashboard palooza that we all live in right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one thing you said really caught my attention. We got someone in the front door.
No, they'll go away.
They'll go away. We got one thing you said that caught my attention is that you sort of fell into it by accident. That's a super common theme in mid-market ERP. I don't know anyone who goes to school for mid-market ERP because they don't even know what it is. And then I hadn't thought about it at the time. It was that way for you. Nowadays, it's a lot more common where there's like official courses on data analysis and all that. It's still not that way for mid-market ERP. So anyways, I think it's really interesting that your experience was actually very similar to a mid-market ERP person. No one goes to school expecting to do that.
Yeah, you start in a financial accounting role, you start maybe a technology role, and you kind of fall into it one way or another.
And so business objects, the only reason I know that name is from Crystal Reports. Mm-hmm. But was it Crystal Reports you were working with or some other product? Because I think they had a suite of products, right?
They had a dashboard product that was called Excelsius. It was like,
oh, that was Excelsius. Because I was gonna ask you about that next. Okay,
yeah, all right. That makes me kind of like a relic now. Like it feels like yesterday, but it's so long ago. But yeah, then Business Objects got acquired by SAP, and then I decided to kind of ride that rocket ship kind of alongside. Like I've always had an entrepreneurial kind of spirit. I've always had a side hustle, side gig building stuff. So I founded a startup consulting firm turned product company and kind of rode that Business Objects SAP wave until Tableau and the Power BIs kind of like took over.
So you got in a good 10-year run or so with Business Objects, right?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it was an incredible run.
And Excelsius specifically, how I found out about you, I'm almost positive. I need to go back and check for sure, but I read the Data Visualization for Dummies book by Miko Yuk, and I like the For Dummies series because I'm a total simple brain person. But my favorite thing about the For Dummies yellow series is that they find authorities on the subject. That's what I like. And Miko was the data visualization person, and I'm pretty sure she mentioned you somewhere in the book. And then I looked you up, saw that you were in San Diego. I was like, oh, I'll just reach out, see if he's up for grabbing lunch. And we did. And we've kept in touch since. But I think it was in there that she talked about Excelsius. And I think you had like a community that you ran or that you're very involved. Tell me about the community side, like a community forum thing. Right?
Yeah, we ran a technology, which is near and dear to your heart, but we ran a technology oriented community for their dashboarding product, which was SAP Dashboards. And
that's just another name for Excelsius?
Yeah,
same thing.
That's what they rebranded it. And we built a community around practical implementation and tech tips and like how to succeed. And so that goes into I know her passion and certainly something I love is community building, right? Yeah. Your instinct is, we've accumulated knowledge and experience. You want to pass that forward, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people in these communities have that in common. And so we built up this incredible community. I know Miko rolled that into her own training and learning in the book. And if anyone picks up that Data Viz for Dummies book and actually reads through it, I can't even express enough how relevant that is now. Like the blueprints and the frameworks and how you gather requirements and how you build storyboards, that stuff is so relevant now. And I'm fortunate to get to partner with folks like Miko and others that are kind of like masters at their craft, and I've just taken a few nuggets here and there and kind of remixed it into what I do every day.
That's really cool. So yeah, the community side, I'm just curious if this resonates with you. I like to describe community work as being primarily a labor of love. It's not a money-making endeavor. Was that your experience?
That's my own experience. I know folks, and I appreciate like packaging training and learning and courses. And that's a great way to fuel that passion, right? Because it takes so much time. I mean, you're 183 episodes in, right? That is hundreds of hours into grabbing I've watched several episodes, grabbing great people, experience, packaging that up and delivering it. It has to be a passion. You have to love it. Otherwise, it feels
found
like
the same
work.
thing. Yeah, I like keeping it in the hobby part of my brain, but I still feel like I'm probably like maybe staying with it too long. I don't know, but the move to ERPSeal.com is with the idea of putting more video training courses out there where you get some compensation for the work. But I agree with you. It's primarily driven by interest. It's sort of in the hobby part of your brain. It's not a great career path for anyone out there looking to make a lot of money, but it's fun. It's enjoyable. And so you then pivoted, or not pivoted, but you kind of grew into a bunch of other stuff. And we don't have to go into all the things you built, but I was thinking of maybe, would you be comfortable talking about the Claude story from yesterday in the car? Maybe not the details, or you can say yes or no. Your ride back yesterday to the office.
Oh, here,
just the general workflow. All right. So we're talking about business objects, Excelsius, which is primarily an Excel thing, right? It was like an Excel add-in, I think.
Yeah, it's like an Excel. Yeah, without getting to it, it was like an Excel-based dashboard builder thing,
which was a big deal at the time.
Oh yeah.
Now it's kind of not a big deal. But you also working with like the big SAP, not SAP Business One or Business Objects, like the for HANA, what it is nowadays, big companies, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. My entire entry into the world of BI, because it was along this like business objects rocket ship in the SAP, I only worked with large enterprises. And so, you know, I spent 3-4 years running, like literally running around client to client, dropping in, you know, parachuting in to kind of help either troubleshoot or fix issues or help get things started. So it's like you get to see a lot of things doing that. But you never spend enough time, even if you spend a month, you never really spend enough time to like really feel the pain, right? Unless if you like manage an entire initiative end to end. But yeah, my entire experience was large enterprise and all of the nuance and challenges that come with that in terms of speed, number of people, distribution of people, and just how slow it is to get things done. And so, yeah,
a lot of red tape,
tons of red tape. And so that's why it's been so much fun. And we can go into like what I'm doing now, but to bring it back to the Claude story now, I've been working with smaller enterprise around some of the, you know, AI. And, you know, the story yesterday as I'm driving in.
Yeah. So yeah, what set the tone there. So Excelsius, but the tool really doesn't matter, right? In the sense that you learned how things are done in really big enterprises, which I think is super great experience, right? Because everyone wants to know how the big kids do it, right? And now, so tech-wise though, now let's just fast forward all the way to yesterday.
Yeah.
And so tell the story of what you just did yesterday.
You scale up, but I'm like focused on like, how do I pare this down, right? And on that grain, I mean, the story is on the way literally to meet you, I was stuck in traffic for an hour and a half. And Claude is my primary mode of working when and it's even become like while I'm sitting at my desk. I know you use Whisperflow, but because I have Claude connected to an agent, which has access to multiple semantic layers, which has access to my data.
And you had just met with a client. So you're coming back from a meeting with a client.
I was literally coming out of a meeting with a client where we're solving a very nuanced, painful problem. For our purposes, let's just say churn, right? It's a churn-based type of problem. Anyone who's had to do churn analysis understands that. But we're solving this complex churn. We've gotten to the other part of that like aha moment, and we're trying to decide what is the action, what are the adjustments and recommendations we're going to make. And when you make recommendations, you need to forecast and predict and figure out like what's the impact. And so while I was driving over here,
like the impact of the change that you're recommending,
the impact of the change that we're going to make, because there's
how are you going to measure it so you know if it actually is true what you're thinking.
There's profitability, there's risk, like we're pulling all of these levers that we're going to make this change. And so because my Claude has context of this entire initiative that's gone on for, let's say, 3 weeks, I was able to hop in and like fresh, without breaking stride, say, okay, hey, let's map this recommendation out. I had a whole bunch of questions leaving the meeting. And basically I was able to fire off and just go back and forth with Claude for an hour. I had an hour-long conversation in my car over the Bluetooth, where the net of it was we ran maybe 15, 20 different queries, different cuts. We're doing cohort analysis, doing what if analysis, and I'm getting the readout as I'm driving to come have that meeting. So by the time
the audio readout. So this is the voice, you're saying voice and it's coming back to you with voice, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason this works is because I'm zoned in, I'm focused in on the objective function, right? And in our case, the objective function is to, without getting into it, making a series of changes to our product or come up with a new product offering. And I'm doing the analysis, understanding the different levers to risk and profit, and applying those levers to different cohorts in the history of what's happened. And so, and I showed you the text to the CEO where it's like, hey, I got to the bottom of what we need to do, and I was able to package that up, ship that over. And now we're collaborating on a Word document back and forth where Claude has the mental capacity to like understand and have context to this entire initiative. So it's really this like voice mode of operating and being inquisitive and focusing on the objective function, which is literally transformed the way that I work.
That's so interesting. Yeah, so we go from Excel dashboarding tool to basically working in the car via conversation. Yeah. And so there's a lot in between there, right? But I think the most recent stuff that's in between there and the stuff that I wanted to really focus on, because I still don't get it. We've talked about it a number of times, but I think because I haven't done it, I think I have to sit down and do it to get it. And my job on this conversation is going to be to like make it as simple as possible, because you're going to explain it in like a really comprehensive way. That's your job. Like, be comprehensive, do it well. But basically, the near term, you would not have been able, let me put it this way. You didn't just open up Claude, or could have been ChatGPT on your drive back yesterday, like the generic version, and have a conversation with it.
No.
It had access to stuff. And so there's a whole layer of plumbing that you had to put in place to have that what seemed like a magical experience yesterday, right? And I think, and I could be wrong on this, I think a key component to that is this thing that's kind of vaguely known as a semantic model. And that's what I want to focus, the semantic model. And am I in the right ballpark there?
I mean, I'll just use it, like we have captured the semantics of all of like, there's two things. So first I'll separate two things.
Tell us what a semantic model is. First of all, it seems like a very important thing in the age of AI. Do you agree?
Oh, 100%.
All right. So semantic model, big deal. Now, what is it?
Yeah. What I won't do is define a technology or a standard or any of that. What is super important is that we capture, there's data semantics, right? So there's the data that lives wherever it's going to live. And there's the business meaning behind that data. So applying business meaning to data.
So give me an example. Like if I think of a table in a database, which is where a lot of business data lives, the column names are typically not that friendly. Like I'll give an Acumatica one because I come from the Acumatica. GL Tran is the general ledger. And then you have a debit AMT for a debit amount. Tell me what does semantics mean? Like what does that mean in a data context?
Ultimately, what you're describing, like on your ledger, that is ultimately going to need to roll up into something that is human intelligible, right? That ledger.
So you don't think the human's going to go look at millions of rows in the general ledger table? Yeah, I'm just kidding. Of course not.
Someone can. I'll give you a simpler example, and I'd like to use this one because this one caused me a lot of pain. Maybe in a similar table, you have a billing state and a shipping state.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect example. Yes,
because
love that.
You've got a ton of ambiguity, right? How is AI going to know when to use what for other than if you're going to send a bill or if you're going to ship something?
Perfect. Like that example. Yeah.
The data, the raw data semantics is that billing or shipping. Now, I'm a BI guy. I'm an analytics guy.
And instead of saying semantics, can I just say words?
Meaning, yeah.
Meaning, words. Yeah. Okay. A description.
Yeah. Okay. It really is meaning, right? Okay. And because that meaning can be encapsulated in many different ways, and that's where a lot of folks argue about these things. Is like, what standard do you encode that meaning? Is it a long description, a short description, a tag, like all the
characters, blah, blah, blah. Meaning.
It's
okay. Meaning. Got it.
It really is.
What does this mean? Okay.
What does this mean? And then what does it mean in context for the task or work that you're doing?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if my task or work is that I need to send a bill or I need to ship something, the data has the semantics it needs. But what if I need to understand the distribution of our customers? right? I need to know, hey, where are the concentration of my customers in the United States?
Yeah. Give me a map.
Give me a map.
Yeah.
Well, the person responsible for preparing that report, that analysis or whatever it says, well, yeah, we use the billing state. Like that's our standard. And I know that because like I'm the person that prepares the report, and 50 other reports in my system all use billing states, or somebody handed down the knowledge, or maybe a dictionary or a document. It's like, as a corporation, we always use billing state. And that's the state that we segment our entire business. Great. But if you point AI at that table, how is it supposed to know that use billing state instead of shipping state? It's a
perfect
potentially
example.
A coin
Love
flip.
that. Yeah. Okay.
And so
so what do you mean when you were talking about data semantics? Like,
so data semantics.
Yeah, tell me what that is in that context.
Ooh, I'm gonna scoot over. I get the sunlight right in my eye.
You're okay?
Yeah. So it'll go on my shoulder. The sun will move around my shoulder.
It's fine, no problem.
So
it's just the San Diego effect on the video. Yeah,
so when we talk about semantics in context of AI or analytics in general, it's putting that extra layer of meaning on top of billing and shipping state. So for example, I use the word description. Perfect. Your description of that billing state field is, billing state defines the, where we apply bills to, and it's also what our go-to-market, finance, and executive team uses to segment our geographic market penetration. I'm making it up on the fly, right?
But basically, maybe as a paragraph.
It could be
roughly a paragraph, couple paragraphs, maybe.
So
in your experience, in this example, what is it?
In my experience, having as much depth as possible.
Okay.
I think historically, the traditional semantic layers was just enough to provide like a guiding light to the person who's ultimately going to build more layers of tech.
Got it.
And so,
but you want to be more verbose with AI. One, because it has the capacity to understand it, and two, you want to leave less room for ambiguity. Maybe.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the challenge that everyone has right now is that when you apply, there's always the question, where do you acquire the semantic, like the meaning from, and where is it applied? And that's why I like to separate this concept of data semantic, and we'll talk about business semantics. But if you're going to apply data semantics, and you hear and you read about semantic layers, you ultimately just need to provide enough depth, however long it is, to differentiate all of the information and whatever data you're going to use.
Because really, it's just about picking the right one.
100%.
Yeah,
I mean, you'll have tables, and I do a lot of go-to-market type analytics. So like I'll use Salesforce or any CRM, it doesn't matter the vendor. There could be 50 fields all labeled almost identical.
Sure.
And so that's why applying meaning to business meaning to data is so important, because ultimately people and now AI need to decipher and understand the meaning of data. And that is what a lot of the BI platforms, Business Objects was one of them. Microsoft obviously has Fabric. A lot of these semantic layers that we read about are really data semantic layers, and they're really important. And so
and one reason why I need it, and here's the part where it still hasn't clicked for me, because I think I need to sit down and do it. But if I'm a mid-market ERP consultant, a lot of these mid-market products, I know Acumatica the best personally, but there's a bunch of them, and a lot of them will use Microsoft SQL Server as the backend. Although Postgres is actually becoming pretty popular for the backend. Either way, in either one of those systems, I can picture a table with rows and columns. But is there even a way to attach a description to a column, or is that where you start needing this technology called the semantic layer?
Yeah, I mean, because the semantic layer is that additional. I mean, it is like a layer, right? It's a metadata layer, right? To be technical, but the important thing is you're capturing meaning, not even necessarily. not even necessarily from like your raw tables. Ultimately, what you're going to do, if whether it's AI or, and mind you, I'm coming from like an analytics decision support kind of perspective, is that ultimately that GL that you're talking about is going to need to be transformed or rolled up into some type of decision support, some type of report, some type of pre-packaged insight, whatever that may be. Like you're going to want to be able to ask a question of that general ledger and presumably connect that to other data sources. So these semantic layers typically, and like I don't want it to be a vendor conversation, but the semantic layers typically will not only hold the meaning of potentially raw information, but also the aggregate of that information. That's where you get into, defining facts and dimensions, and that's where it starts getting very technical. But ultimately, the goal is to establish meaning behind the data that you're going to use for just really decision support.
And that was a light bulb moment for me whenever you taught me that. I don't know, it wasn't that long ago, months ago, last year, I don't remember. But I like starting at the database level because a lot of mid-market ERP consultants are familiar with that. And even if you're not a database person, you know an Excel spreadsheet. Pretty much everyone knows that. They understand rows and columns of data. And I like the reason why I'm starting there is when we talk about adding that multi-paragraph description, as verbose as you can be, I at first was just thinking of it as, hey, I just need a way to like right click on the column and say add description. So that gets stored with the column. But what you taught me was that the semantic model is more than that. It's more than just your base raw layer. You're actually building kind of almost a pyramid of like these, like you said, the aggregate values, the total sales. When you now ask a question to the AI, you don't necessarily need it to go all the way back down to the database and find tables. You just need to find to the metric that calculate total sales or something like that. Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, the most, from a tech perspective, most semantic layers is a series of instructions of where to, like the meaning and how to derive the data at the right level that you need it for decision support. So as an example, the case that I was explaining from yesterday, right, where I'm like, I'll use churn analysis generically. We have a semantic layer that's used really to understand kind of just like core foundational performance, right? This is financial services, so let's say loans, right? And under a semantic layer that describes all of the loans and the ultimate result of that loan, right? There is a semantic layer that describes how to use that data source. And that data source, that underlying data is a rollup or an aggregate. And so then we built another semantic layer that's used solely for the purpose of churn analytics. And so when you build these, when you're building semantics and you're deriving meaning, the objective function for that is so important. Otherwise, it's not worth building any of this stuff.
Yeah, what's the end result? The end result is being able to work in your car on the way back and find out information about things?
Yeah, the point of arrival is for me to understand, like the traditional decision support BI is like, the point of arrival is to understand what has happened historically. And that takes a lot of work to get the raw data, to pinch and pull and model it, to make sure that the definitions, the semantics, the meaning of that data is correct. And then that allows us to understand like, hey, what happened? What's happened for me to even get to this point to know that we need to make a change? And then we have this second semantic layer where we have to take a lot of that same data, remix, repackage, transform it in a structure that allows us to understand churn, right? And the point of arrival for me is that we understand what happened. We can have ideas of, hey, like, what should we do? And to be able to run that, like different analysis scenarios, and the machine, or in this case AI, understand enough at a level that an analyst would, to be able to do what you do in Excel, to pivot, to come up with 20 different pivots, to look at different cohorts, to segment.
You use that word cohort multiple times. What do you mean when you say cohort?
So looking at
like a segment, like
a segment. So it's a segment for a specific period of time. So in other words, we have an event. So you take a loan, right? In a certain month, you have so many customers that take a loan or become a customer. That is now a cohort or a group.
Okay.
But time is the constraint. You're locking in that point in time as a constraint.
Okay.
So that you can measure what happens forward.
Okay. Okay.
And that's really, when I say it's a segment, it's
okay.
a fancy word for segment.
But it's not yet. It is time. So I was thinking initially a bit like, let's say my customers I've got wholesale and I've got like retail customers. I was thinking of it being like you'd segment your customers, but this has a time element to it as well.
A cohort's going to have
it sounds like it's something that you're going to measure yourself against. And that's why you need to fix it's last year or it's last quarter or something like that.
Yeah.
So you can see how you're doing against that benchmark or something like that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Because you're taking it's like you're peering through a glass based on what happened prior.
Okay.
Right. So when I say a cohort, like let's say, hey, we brought all these customers in 2025. What happened to them? Right. And back to churn, right? A percentage of them left. Well, why? And what's the impact? So that's kind of where cohorts come in.
And that becomes a part of the semantic layer, and that it's not, I think of total sales as being a real simple metric, but it does get more nuanced when you start talking about last quarter sales, last year sale. Do all those things become part of the semantic?
100%.
Interesting.
That time dimension is time in general is literally one of the most important dimensions that you need to like really lock in and get sorted out, so that whether it's people doing work together, people preparing reports, like what you use as your like time dimension is typically where people end up with different versions of numbers, different
Interesting
versions of truth. So two people can walk into the same room with the same data, and if they just use two different time dimensions, they can get a radically different result. So you have to take those things into account. And the same way I explained to you the cohort, right, and the meaning, all of that has to be encoded inside of the semantic layer for AI to be able to use it.
And so does it still boil down to, I'm calling it metric, but you give me the better word for it, metric and description? Is that the fundamental building blocks of a semantic layer?
I think that's what we've kind of landed on. The metric itself.
And you go with metric? Is that the word you use? Or
I have a
node or
metric. I stick with metric because if metric is what we've universally accepted as like a connective tissue between business and tech, then I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay.
In a data semantic layer, a metric is a definition that typically has a time dimension, right? Back to time being really important. So you're specifying time. You're obviously giving it a semantic meaning, like the actual meaning, and you have the ability to establish how that is calculated from an aggregation perspective. Because when you define a metric, usually there's some type of roll-up or aggregation applied to it, or a calculation, right?
For simple purposes, I could think of it. I know this is too simplistic, but because I can think of it like a sum if formula in Excel.
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And I know it gets more complicated than that, but yeah, it's my formula used to calculate the actual metric. Yeah.
In a semantic layer, a sum if with a description would, and maybe a time dimension is basically a metric.
Okay. Okay. And then how do so what I'm starting, and this is still like, this is real time Tim trying to learn this and just sharing it with anyone else who finds it interesting. Again, going back to that mid-market ERP consultant, right? A lot of ERP consultants right now are freaking out. Like, do I still have a job in a couple of years, or is AI just taking the whole thing, right? And I think we don't need to get into the I don't know, the sci-fi version of that, but I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for mid-market ERP consultants to get into this kind of thing. And the reason is they're getting asked to do AI.
Yep.
But what a lot of people do is they just drag in a bunch of Excel files and they expect the AI to make the magic, right? Why I'm honing in on the mid-market ERP consultant is they're very familiar with business processes, and they're very familiar with what leads to data landing in a certain place. The semantic model is starting to feel to me like almost the same thing, but in reverse. Do you see some similarities there in the sense that when you're thinking about a business process, you're thinking about a flow, how information flows through a system. And when you're talking about semantic layer, it almost seems like the reverse of that flow in the sense that you have to connect the metrics together. Does that resonate at all? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when I look at an ERP or any process flow, the thing, because I get involved in like the build or design of these things, and usually I'm the guy in the corner of the room as
like the architecture of the ERP.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, and I usually tell folks to say, hey, how are you going to know if it works or not? Like when you finish whatever process flow that you go through and you have all the business logic and it like ultimately inserts into a cell or into a record, right? Or it updates a record. How do you know that like what are you going to do to measure that thing worked?
Love that.
And if there's a good answer for that, you're like one step ahead of the curve, because now you're effectively tagging or measuring like an event, whatever that process flow may be. And a lot of what the metric ends up becoming, a lot of metrics end up becoming a reflection of what events have occurred.
Or we could say a process.
Or a process.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
And so in one process, you may have sub processes. And so back to how are we logging and making sure that we're aware of what happens through all of these sub processes, and what are we naming these events? Like how are we tagging? And it's just a yes, did it work? Yes or no. It could be that simple. And that becomes some of the core ingredients that ultimately become metrics. And it's going to be like a subset, a tiny subset.
Love that.
And so if you're introducing new products, if you're introducing
when you say subset, you mean if there's 50 steps in a business process diagram, you might only need 2 metrics to know if the thing's working. Is that what you mean by subset?
Yeah, I mean, well, so you may only need a couple of metrics that are important enough.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't track everything. I mean, you can, and that's what a lot of the like grand thinkers and futurists, right, post about, that like one day all of those little micro events will just be fed into a vat, and the AI will magically understand this process that you built because it was along for the ride, and somehow it like, okay, cool, but
maybe I don't want to go there. Yeah,
cool, great.
Yeah,
but for now, right, the executive team or the person responsible and accountable for that process at minimum needs to understand, like, hey, we built this process. Did it work? And how many times did it work? And who did it work for? And who did it not work for? And then now, if you start framing the questions like that, then you start attaching those events to things that really matter, which is revenue and profitability and risk and like all of those things that you're using to actually steer your business. Like it kind of rolls up into those things.
So I had not, until we were talking about just now, we've had multiple conversations on this, but I don't know, there's something about the hot mic on a podcast maybe that makes me more alert. But I hadn't considered the relationship between the two in the semantic model context. This has occurred to me just doing mid-market ERP consulting. many, many years ago, and that it clicked for me at one point that business process and what I was calling reporting were just two sides of the same coin. Because if you just obsess about one, you wind up in two extremes. One extreme is the lean Six Sigma black belt ninja type who's hyper focused on efficiency, but you don't really know why. You're like, hey, I just got this machine runtime down from 1 minute and 5 seconds to 57 seconds. And you're like, okay, does that matter? And that's where you need a way to measure, right? To know, like, do I care about something, improving something? And then the other side is you're just on the analysis side, but you have no ability to turn the levers that matter to actually change the outcomes. Does that resonate with you? Like,
No.
I hadn't thought about, though, in the context of a semantic model. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, and ultimately, so yes, that's 100% correct. And the reality is that whatever processes you're building in your ERP system, some of them really matter, like at that level, right? They roll up really well, financials in particular. But there's a whole series of process, like when you get into supply chain, and there's a whole, in your ERP system, you're ordering and moving of products and formulation of like whatever widgets you're delivering, whether it's physical widgets or services. Like, the makeup of that is really important, and the process that you go through is really important signals and potential, like, smaller dials that all roll up to revenue. And so that's where I'm very deliberate in separating back to like data semantics, right? When you roll all these events up and you roll all this information up into a data warehouse or an Excel sheet. It could just be Excel, right? Let's keep it simple.
Yeah, perfect.
If you have an Excel
sheet,
speaking
my language.
Yeah, if you have an Excel sheet that's an aggregate of a lot of this stuff, and you roll it up into a pivot table, and you have definitions, and you build more columns where you start building ratios, and you divide one thing by the other.
Yeah.
Right. Like, those are great examples of metrics where you need to like aggregate and start creating derivative calculations, because now you're starting to create meaning that hopefully is usable to like improve the process, right? That feedback loop. And so ultimately you want to roll up, aggregate information, give it meaning and context, and then ship that off to someone that can actually use that information.
Which these days, a lot of times, is just an LLM, right?
So it can be.
I mean, it used to be that people would actually use the semantic model directly. Now, are you seeing more and more it's just a chat interface on top of the semantic layer?
Well, I think so. I think you could go from like really simple back to our Excel example. I can take my spreadsheet, I can roll up the data in a pivot table, I can add 15 more columns, right, with my if then kind of formulas. I can take that, I can load it into an LLM, and
like just the Excel file itself.
Yeah, just the Excel file.
Okay.
I can give it a dictionary or a glossary where I can like write out all the definitions of my columns, and I can produce results that would rival really anything that we see out there with, the top companies.
Interesting.
Right. And
your technology for that is just a .xlsx file.
It
all lives in that thing. It's
an Excel file.
Interesting. Okay.
And the key is the semantics, is the meaning behind that, where every column in that spreadsheet that you're feeding to the LLM or another person has a purpose for being there. And if that's where it's like back to objective function. If your objective function is to solve a problem or understand the dynamics of what that Excel sheet is supposed to tell you, or you don't know, like you at least need to have some type of goal in mind when you're analyzing and you're looking at this data. Because whatever that goal is going to dictate what's inside of your spreadsheet. And I would argue that just a spreadsheet, an objective function, and a dictionary or a glossary or whatever you want to call it, I mean, that is a semantic layer.
So
in its simplest terms.
Let's walk through an example and build it then. So, a common place I think where companies start when they're starting to get into data analysis, whether they realize it or not, it's on the wanting to grow revenue. So like, hey, we want more revenue. How do we do that? So if our top level executive goal is we want to go from being a $10 million company to a $15 million company, and we want to do that in the next year, then let's talk about how we would build the Excel file.
Yeah. So you start with customers, like revenue acquisition, and there's two ways, and I'm just using any type of generic company with sales, marketing, because you can get very nuanced.
Let's make it a distributor.
Okay. Let's
pick whatever you want.
Sorry. I was gonna say, because that gets a little nuanced. I just want to keep it. Obviously, I know your audience.
Manufacturer.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah. So you want to grow manufacturing. Let's use manufacturing, right? The way you're growing revenue is shipping more widgets.
Perfect.
Right. There's multiple levers to this, right? It's if I'm honed in on growing revenue by shipping more, I'm narrowing it, right? We're gonna understanding where your constraints and levers are for that. There's at a highest level, you're either going to ship more widgets to your existing buyers, right? Or you're going to get more buyers. And so understanding those levers and then work the outcomes. So you're going to say, hey, how many new buyers did we add, right? What is the growth or decay of our existing clients? And then what is my net, right? How are we flat? What is the slope? Are we sloping down, up, whatever? And then you get into all the efficiency, right? So there's a whole efficiency play, right? Is there bottlenecks? And that's why these problems are tough. But if we're just saying, we're going to say customer centric, where I've got all the supply I need.
Yeah, and let's focus on the one where, we've got all the supply I need, so I need more customers.
I need more buyers, right? And so what you would do is, becomes a go-to-market, and that's why I always gravitate toward that because that's my sweet spot. And
because it's the most mysterious, right? It's hard for people to be like, where do I find my new customers, right? You can add a lot of value there.
Yeah, it's where are my customers coming from? Where are we seeing growth? But you're ultimately starting from generating revenue. You're starting from customers and defining what type of customers, right? So that back to semantic layer, right? You're starting to pull these things together as far as how much revenue did my month over month, right? How much revenue did each customer create? And then
base level of data, I'll keep it real simple. Forget Power Query, forget Power Pivot. Let's just say we bring in accounts receivable invoice lines, and we'll use that as our definition of revenue. We'll bring that into a table in Excel. That'll be our first sheet. That's the raw data we have to work with. And now our next sheet is where you're at. And now, you can start slicing and dicing by date. So, keep going.
Yeah, so you need the date that the customer came in. What's the age of this customer, and does it grow or does it decay? So when did this customer first come in? You don't need the whole lifetime from the beginning, but what's the age of the customer, for example? You want to know, what's their average shipping, what are they buying on average, right? So you assemble all of these signals, metrics, that define.
So you're now talking about a table or pivot where it's one row per customer, and now you're starting to talk about the metrics across. When did they come in? Okay, but it's one row per customer, right?
One row per customer. Right. How long are they? Where are they located? You start basically establishing a profile of your customers, both new and existing, and basically you're kind of gathering all of the facts, gathering all the information that you need in one place for you to be able to ask the question, hey, where are we seeing the most growth from customers, and where are we seeing the decay? And how many new customers are we adding over a period? Because you can answer that question of, if you know when they came in and you have an entire list of all of your customers, you know when they came in, right? So you start deriving these measurements, right, or metrics. And the idea is that once you have enough data for your, for your customers or your buyers, when you accumulate enough of these signals, you can either manually do it, right, by slicing and dicing and segmenting, or that's where AI really comes in and becomes useful and helpful.
Okay.
Right. So at the end of the day,
we missed the dictionary part though. So we have I'm picturing it as a sheet of raw data, a sheet of pivots, and then there's a third sheet in there that's just going to be basically you're going to turn the columns from the pivot into rows and then write a description of each one. Is it that simple?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's the dictionary. All right, so you kind of have those, and for the AI piece, it doesn't even care about the raw data. It only cares about the pivoted tab and the dictionary tab and such, right?
I mean, and it most of the time, and this is where you get into like machine learning and all these other kind of things. At the end of the day, it's what's most predictive for your objective function. If my objective function is growing my customers, and there's different ways to even measure that, but if you have a objective or something that you want to impact, all of this exercise that we're talking about boils down to what are the things that we need to understand that influence this outcome. And ultimately, for us to understand, like conceptualize and understand that requires taking data, manipulating it, pivoting it, rolling it up, and creating new derivative data, ratios, things like that, to ultimately understand how am I going to grow this customer.
An example of that could be sales. So revenue, we'd have that information. We would also have cost of goods sold in that accounts receivable invoice line table. And so a derivative example would be, well, let's just create a calculation for profit, which is just the revenue minus the cost of goods sold. That's an example of a derivative, like KPI in a sense.
Yeah.
Metric.
Yeah, and I mean, and maybe you need that because you can grow. Like once again, this is why the gig is so tough, right? Is you can grow revenue, you can grow orders, but then what's the next question? Great. Are these our most profitable buyers? Right? Are we going to take a bath? Right. You can grow top line, but is that going to be a profitable endeavor? So back to like having levers and dials, right? Like as you're designing and building these things becomes really important. And what a really good data analyst has is one, that capacity and understanding of what's the objective function, because you always have to anchor back to that. Otherwise you get kind of lost in the sauce. So it's like if you have an objective function and there's a series of questions that you need to answer to get to that, a great analyst knows how to pull and assemble and pinch and pull data to like explain and demonstrate like how do we get there? Because there's multiple paths. That's the other thing. There's multiple ways to get to the same result. AI is, if given all of these, like back to context and semantics, if explaining the meaning of all of these data points occurs, the LLMs are incredibly capable of wearing that hat as the data analyst to slice and dice and pinch and pull the data. And that's literally what I was doing yesterday.
Interesting.
Right? Bring it back to that car trip over here, is that I had already prepared all of the ingredients, AI assisted, but like all of the levers and dials had been identified and the data had been prepared. And then for our case, just assume it was Excel, right? It doesn't matter the tech.
Yeah, this is really helping, just picturing an Excel.
Yeah.
Because that's where I get tripped up. Like I haven't used Snowflake, which you're a fan of. Then there's Databricks we talked about. And that's where I get tripped up because I can't picture it, but I can picture it in Excel. So I really like this.
So think of it this way. Because this is how a lot of companies operate. I had one giant Excel sheet with 30 tabs.
Yeah.
And on each one of those tabs,
that's the way a lot of companies operate.
So
there's nothing wrong with it.
In Excel terms, I had one Excel sheet with 100 tabs, but I've hidden 90 of them.
Okay.
Right. So
but 90 of them are driving the formulas in those remaining 10. Yeah. You still need them. You can't delete them.
Data, and then a pivot, and pivot. And then I get like the end result.
Perfect.
Right. So 100 tabs, I've distilled it down to 10. And my understanding of how to distill it down to the 10, that is like that exercise is basically where you're building the semantic layer, the data semantic layer is a great way to frame it.
I love that. And so that's where I think conceptually it starts to look like a pyramid in my head, in the sense that, you know, we have the raw data tab, and then we, like, I'm going to stick with the simple profit one. We have the layer on top of that's directly calculating sales and cost of goods sold. But then I don't have to go back to the raw layer to calculate profit. So that's where it starts to look like a layer above that, where now I just look at the layer right below me and get sales and cost of goods sold, calculate those. But that's super helpful for me, that it's really just a flat list in the definition itself. It just you start to think of it like a pyramid in your head.
Yeah.
I like that. I was thinking the software I was starting to think of some kind of like vector or something like that. But you keep it in Excel terms, that makes it way simpler. I like that.
And for the most part, that's what's happening, right? In all these like sophisticated platforms, is you're starting with some type of raw data, right, or process data from many different systems, and you're building these reusable abstractions of meaning, right? And the same way you would from a raw spreadsheet, and then you create a pivot table, and then you copy that and you add 5 columns, right?
Yeah.
And then you take that, and then that rolls up, and then ultimately at the end of the month, you package that up, it goes into a PowerPoint, and that becomes really the kind of truth of what's actually happening. Like that's where you get into the business semantics.
Before we go there, one more piece on the data side. So if I'm still got the pyramid in my head, when you were, the light bulb moment for me, when you were talking about where the AI then goes to find the information, I always thought about it, because right now, so many times when you ask the AI something, it'll do a web search. It'll go look it up, right? And there's sort of an equivalent to that in business data, where it'll essentially write a SQL query to go find the information. When you do that, it's essentially going back to that bottom raw layer.
Yeah.
But if you've built these metrics on top, so I'm going to stick with the revenue, cost of goods sold, then you do the profit on top of that. Now, when you ask the AI, hey, can you give me profit for last month? It doesn't have to go write a SQL query. It can find the metric for profit and just pull that number. And you were describing something super interesting to me from yesterday, where you just had the voice conversation, but then you go back and look at the chat in Claude, and you can see when it's making a call. I'm going to call it a call to your semantic model versus a call to writing direct SQL. And that gives you a feel for, is it really sure that we have an established thing, or is it in like new frontier territory? Is it, talk to me about that.
Yeah. So that's where the agents, I won't kill us with a million buzzwords, but in Claude specifically, in my use case, Claude is able to do 2 things. It's allowed to ask questions from an agent, and an agent, all an agent is it's a intake for Claude asking a question in plain English, and it's interpreting that question, and that agent has an inventory of semantic layers. So think of it like it has an inventory, that spreadsheet that I talked about with 100 tabs that's been narrowed down.
It's like the dictionary column or the glossary column?
It's got access. Think of it, the agent is having access to that Excel file, but like a dozen of them.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so the agent has access to a narrow scope of information, and it has access to that along with predefined certified queries to answer a plethora of questions, the most common ones, right?
So like my profit one.
If I need, if I need to know revenue or profit by, by month, that's a starting point for so many questions, right? You may want to add columns, or, you may want to pinch or pull, but like that starting point is inside of that semantic layer.
And
right?
so to keep it super simple, the chat interface is going to first go to the semantic agent.
Yep.
And I love that we're just, the term agent is so overused, but we'll call it. All right. So it goes to the semantic agent. Hey, can you find the answer to this in the list of stuff that we built?
Yeah.
If you can't, then I'm going to go to this other agent to be more the geeky SQL, try to figure it out type of thing. That's a simple way of looking at it.
That's the simplest way to put it.
And you can go back and look at your chat log and figure out the cloud will tell you which agent it was using. And that gives you sort of, I think you were explaining to me yesterday, as it sort of gives you an indication of your level of confidence in the response that it comes back with. Is that a good way of describing it?
That's 100% correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
super interesting.
So I get the benefit that I, once again, done the pre-work to build the agents, right? To create that kind of like, I put blinders on it, if you will. I don't give it access to the like underlying like raw tables for the most part. And like everyone, I'm also in build and experiment mode. So when I or one of my executive users goes to use Claude and asks a question, the business users have been trained to use or to look at that signal. So they see if they see it asking like the credit risk agent, it's literally called credit risk analyst. Think of it like a person, right? I have a question. I'm going to pull in my brightest mind into the room and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Go find the answer.
Yeah.
So when you see the analyst agent going and spinning and asking the question, there's a level of comfort that, hey, if it comes back with an answer, it's an answer that's already been grounded on something, and there's a level of curation and work. And then there's also there's a level of always skepticism with AI.
Sure.
But at least there's a higher degree of confidence where, at least in my case, because I've run a really tight lab, if I see it going and writing, it literally says writing SQL, I say, hey, whatever it comes back with, like you need to look at that with a level of kind of skepticism, because it's going and writing SQL. And even with all the work that we've done to curate and build semantics, all this stuff, it's still inferencing and trying to figure out. And the problem is it may not have the data that you need. It may not exist in what it has access to. It may screw something up. It may look to the wrong place. Or it may just like full on interpret something completely wrong. Or pull it wrong. There's all kinds of things that can go sideways at that point.
Yeah, there's definitely a hallucination aspect, although I think it's less and less of an issue. But yeah, who knows? There's lots of reasons why it might have gone down the wrong path. But I like how you describe it as being like a person, because that's very similar to me. If I'm in sales and like the customer has a question about something, if marketing, like product marketing, knows the answer to it, I'm like, okay, we've got this figured out as a company. If they don't, and I then have to go talk to the product team and then talk to engineering, I'm more like, okay, is this a roadmap thing? And that's in the software world. But it's the same idea. It's like, who's giving you the response, whether it's a person or an agent. It's the same level of thinking, I think. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then the trick is like I write about it, like the gig for someone in this like analytics. So
you got like a blog article I could link to?
I don't know that I have
another
blog.
related
it's more
link.
Like my stream of consciousness.
Okay, when you said I write about it, I thought you were talking about
it's
like
more a blurb on LinkedIn.
Thing. Okay,
like I say, like
somewhere in your LinkedIn, which is very active. You're very active on your LinkedIn.
For better or worse, it's literally my stream of consciousness.
It's the same thing for me. I do the same thing.
Of just like what I experience, good, bad, and ugly.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead. I just want to make sure.
Is that the gig now is less about like building dashboards and reports, and it's more building these like reusable assets. Meaning, like, think back to the spreadsheet.
Can we call them metrics?
We can call them metrics.
Yeah,
we can call them metrics, but it's also now monitoring the use of this stuff. Like historically, you would build a spreadsheet template and someone could paste new data in it and it like spits out the answer. When you build a dashboard, you attach it to a query, you build the visuals, you push it off, and business users consume it, and you pray that it's adding value. The gig is changing now, where those same skills that are incredibly valuable are now where you can build and construct these agents to answer the same kind of questions that a dashboard would. But the trick is going back in and evaluating and continuously improving using the history of that conversation. So back to my conversation or what we're talking about around the agent going and fetching information and giving an answer, what I do on a weekly basis is that I go back to the logs and I can see the history of all the conversations that have happened, all of the questions, and ultimately like what SQL has been written. And I mean, now I've systemized a lot of that, but I can go back and roll through this and score and determine, hey, did my agent give back BS to an executive? And then more importantly, I go back, I have it set up with Claude now, where Claude produces a log of the end user like interaction. So I marry those two things. And I'm actually trying to determine, hey, did my agent feed my executive BS information? And did my executive even realize it?
Sure. And you can tell by the log. Yeah.
And so right now, everyone's in experimentation mode, whether they say it or not. Like I am in production. We are using this stuff every single day, but it's done in a kind of a hand holding and or like an asterisk, like,
yeah, you're keeping a human in the loop on this thing. And maybe someday you get to the point where you just give the AI access to the logs. But I think that's you're maybe stepping in that direction. Yeah. But that's where you're at right now.
This is iterative. It's hands-on. It's not like building a process, like all of these probabilistic problem solving agents and AI and even when you build like machine learning models, right? A lot of folks, that's like a whole other world, but it follows the same principle. If you build a score or you build a machine learning model and you roll it out, it decays over time. And so you have to monitor and manage the predictions over time. It's always been that way. And so when you think about shipping an agent, you have to monitor and understand what happens with these agents and what it's doing.
I love that.
And so right now, the tools are getting there, but right now the tools are very, very crude. Even on the top companies, the Snowflakes and Databricks and Microsoft, they'll build or acquire their way into making it easier for people in common, like who can't possibly look at all the logs for a dozen or hundreds or thousands of people using this stuff. And so the tech is not mature, but that's the gig right now, right? If you're trying to transition or figure out like, how am I going to like use this stuff? I'm building dashboards, I'm building reports. And now my executive came in with the spreadsheet and is running circles around me, right? Ultimately, if you want to like systemize this stuff and get adoption and usage, understanding, monitoring, and constantly iterating on how these agents and machine learning and LLM processes run is a huge part of the process.
Which is like super fun from a data person perspective, because when I know a lot of people who didn't even do this. I learned this lesson years ago, to actually care about how often a report gets launched. I mean, so many times, I think you were giving me numbers yesterday. If you were to ballpark it, we'll just say you were saying you think it's more than 50% of the time you think the chat interface is good enough. And to me, I translated that in my head to more than 50% of the time it's a one-off request. And I learned to ask that question, like, do you really need a dashboard on this, or do you just want an Excel file data dump? Because to me, the answer to that tells me a little bit about if it's a one-time request or not.
Yeah.
So tracking the actual usage, if you just go out and build a ton of reports, I've done that, a lot of people have done that, and you don't monitor which ones are actually getting used, you're missing a big part of it. But even if you get to that level, which a lot of people don't, you don't know why someone went to the reports. That's really interesting that you're analyzing more than just the usage now. You're analyzing like why someone is using it. That's super interesting, because you could have 15 people launching the same report for different reasons.
Yeah.
You can see all that now. I hadn't thought about that.
I have a console that I look at where I literally tag every single, so I have AI evaluate the conversation, and I tag every single interaction and conversation. And I look at a console that literally tells me the topics that were, like, it's like Twitter, right? Or I have trends like Google Trends where you can see topics that are taking off.
Yeah, internal trends.
I go into my console.
That's super cool.
And I can see the topics and trends that are surfacing up, and that becomes a signal. Now, I'm in a position where I have line of sight to the executive team because I'm doing a lot. Like
it becomes a security. You have to have the security settings for this.
But think about this from a job perspective, right? You're in a bigger organization and you're a few layers removed from decisions being made, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a console that literally tells you the conversations and the ideation that's happening.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Right? You're actually
interesting and creepy, but yeah, it is interesting. Yeah.
Well, and this is where transparency has to come out.
Yeah.
Or has to come into play of who gets access to what. But if you think about it, an adjustment to a process or a new process or a new sub-process is usually the result of a direction or a change in direction that's been made for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. To increase revenue or improve profitability. And so these requirements, unless you're like building ground up, right? But if you're an established business and you're making changes, it's usually the conversations and hopefully it's data influenced and not gut, but like there's an influence piece that plays into that where those changes coming down the pipe are coming from that, and like those influences. So there's these like little micro loops everywhere that exist now that historically took too much time, energy, and people where the juice wasn't worth. It was either impossible because people don't have the mental capacity to do it, or it just wasn't economical to do it. It made no sense. And so that's where I start top down, because the problems that an executive team are going to solve and help steer are just more impactful usually.
Right.
And so that's why I start kind of like top down.
When you said layers removed, you meant more like someone who's here, whose layers removed for what's happening down here, not the reverse, right? Yeah.
An executive or a leader or an executive should be able to see the forest through the trees type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're steering a business based on whatever information they have. And it could be good or bad. But ultimately, that ends up translating. It's like a breadcrumb downstream to adding new products, adding new partnerships, making an acquisition. There's all these like small and large scale changes that happen. And so what's interesting, like from my seat, is now I have a lens into the minds and what's happening. Think about a dashboard. You deploy a dashboard. The dashboard just tells you kind of like where you're at. And what do people do? They export it to Excel.
Mm-hmm.
They do some stuff. They have an aha moment or a hypothesis, and then they present it in PowerPoint. That whole chain is lost. And so now, if you're using an LLM or you're using AI,
the chain of how they went from raw to what landed in PowerPoint. Okay. The decisions made, the thinking.
The whole like chain of thought and thinking. And sometimes it's flawed or wrong, right? Just flat out incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like what we've been doing the last 10 years is like building a dashboard as like a nice curated business oriented view of what's happening or what happened. And then from that, you end up like pulling down and extracting like the details of like, how did we get there? And then there's all of this analysis type of work that happens. And then ultimately that becomes the Excel file or the PowerPoint. And so what's changing, or I think the opportunity for people that are involved in that chain, because the people involved in that change of like building the Excels and slicing and dicing and figuring out what's actually going on, like that's one of the most valuable skills. So if you can apply those skills to helping teach and formulate these agents and the AI, like AI and LLMs, if you can like coach them, now the byproduct of that is actually getting into the mind and understanding what, like the what and the why behind like the direction of these businesses.
And that's, to me, I hadn't thought about that direction. To me, that starts to get creepy. Here's why. To me, it comes down to trust. If executives, and I think you might already be seeing this, like I don't think this is a sci-fi thing. I think this is happening now. When executives get to the point where they trust the AI's opinion more than anyone else at their company, that's when that starts to get a little creepy to me. So if you were to put your worker hat on, someone who's a couple levels down from the executive C-suite team in a medium-sized company, I'm not talking about Fortune 500 or something. What's their incentive? And I think there's a big trust thing going on, even politically, with like, should I care about AI or just take a principled stand against it? What would their incentive be for using the chat interface and basically exposing their brain to the executive? Like, and don't talk to me about like, talk to me about the way you think it should be. You know, if you mentioned transparency, I think a lot of it comes down to trust. Like, one is the executives need to, if they're going to trust the AI more than the people, they need to understand that the AI is really just an aggregation of the people's opinions. And then on the flip side, the people need to trust that the executive's not going to come like, you know, you asked AI this thing, you dumb idiot. Why did you ask the AI that? Why didn't you know it already? There's kind of what are your thoughts on that in general? If I'm describing anything concrete here.
We're in the Wild West mode right now, right? Like, it truly is the Wild West. And I've gotten a lens into enough companies, and there's a trust and authority. And
yes, authority is a good word for it too. Yeah, that's the creepy part. That's the scary part, because you can totally come around as an executive and just start beating on people now that you're seeing what they're really doing, right? Yeah.
So AI, the reason why LLMs and AI have been so, like, there's such a push from a top down, is typically an executive has a level of, well, definitely authority, a level of domain, like their own domain expertise, and typically someone who elevates into a leadership role in concept should be able to look at, like, where are we at now, 3 months from now and 3 quarters from now, right? Like, great leaders are able to like see, and on those, back to like seeing the forest through the trees, like a great leader should be able to do that, right? And sometimes there's not great leaders. That's a whole other discussion. But the trust, authority, situational awareness, and organizational awareness, right? Like, those are human conditions, right? And right now we're trying to simulate a lot of that stuff. And so executives are pushing teams kind of top down because on an individual basis, an executive is going to have a lot of success using these LLMs where they're starving is information. These things are lacking a lot of information. So like, there's this push.
This is not dissimilar from ERP.
It's the same thing.
It's only as good as the data you put in, and if you get people to trust putting the data in. Yep. Sorry, keep going. Yep.
So the problem statement is the same that it's been for the last 20 years, right?
Actually, the CRM is probably more relevant, because the salesperson, they want to keep their Rolodex private. That's their value. As soon as they put it in the CRM, they kind of lose their value. It's a similar thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that, and there's a disconnect, and that's where you start getting philosophical around like value and people in a company and their own value that they bring.
Yeah.
Like, I observe, right? I introduce AI to a lot of individuals, right? And when they use the words like scary, like, that's a marker for me. When I hear the word, and when it like does someone's job, or it does somewhat like a task, that they perceive that as the value. Those are cues that teams really need to look for and like set expectations. The leaders that I see that are pushing top down to adopt this stuff, and that have been transparent and accepting that, we're gonna make mistakes, we're gonna like fail forward, like, it's not gonna be perfect, are looking at this of like, how do I make my entire workforce, like, how do I bring everyone up? How do I level everyone up? And so like, you have to look at it through that lens, because it's too easy to look through it through the other way around, like, eavesdropping and like
Yes.
ciphering out someone's know-how so that
Yes.
you can automate them out of work.
That's
Like,
the Gestapo approach,
yeah,
right?
like
The
and
micromanager approach.
you know, there will be scenarios where companies use, like anything in this world, people are going to use it for good, and people are going to use it in a certain way that's like questionable.
Yeah.
Um,
You can get fired for sending a really bad email. You'll be able to get fired for asking AI something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Trust, but to bring it back, the trust is the biggest gap, right? I think things hindering adoption is trust. Still trust in data, like the ingredients, the raw ingredients, maybe not be trusted. The companies that are producing the LLMs are not trusted. The structure or the companies that have risen to the top, the Claudes and OpenAIs of the world, like there's just a general mistrust that anything we put in these systems is going, regardless of their data protection agreement. Like I think we just genuinely don't inherently trust Claude or OpenAI. I don't, and I use the products every day.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
And that's the conversation I have with with legal and with executives, is that, hey, we should just generally not trust in general these companies at this stage of the game, regardless of your data protection agreement. These are $1 trillion companies now, or whatever they're worth. So we should tread carefully, not put any PII in them, not put anything that if it were leaked or became searchable on Google, that we're not going to have some really uncomfortable conversations.
And that part, I think, pretty much everyone's aware of that.
Yeah.
The part I hadn't thought about until this conversation is just the level of trust in the organization. And that to me is so similar to the same challenge that's gone on for decades with any type of centralized system like an ERP or a CRM, because it really comes down to, I think we'll get past the trust AI part. I really do. I think, I can remember when everyone was distrustful of online banking, right? It just takes a little while to get used to a new tech. I think we'll get there. But the challenge is always going to be the trust in the organization, I think, because it's the same thing with the ERP or the CRM. Like, you have to trust that you're not, to me, the fundamental shift is learning that you're not trusting a piece of technology, that the technology is just the glue that's bringing people's opinions and thoughts together. Because that's what an ERP is. Like, if I'm going to update the customer record, and everyone else needs to trust that the person who updated it knew what they were doing, instead of just coming into, and so there has to also be a person level. Oh, I can tell it was updated by so-and-so. We went to lunch last week, and yeah, they know what they're talking about, right? And to me, I think there's something similar going on here and to me, that's good news.
Yeah.
Because then it's not just the AI coming in and doing its own thing. It's that the AI is just going to amplify the level of trust that already exists in our organization. I like that.
And it's going to be like the dirty G word, governance, right? Like, people hate governance and controls, right? Like, there will be, whether we rebrand it and we call it something else, but there is this layer of governance needed for like the entire chain.
And governance is basically, where's the data, who has access to it, which customers can you see, all that stuff, right?
I always explain data governance. Is it secure, number one? Like, do the right people, is it locked down? Is it secured? Is it available? And is it correct? Right? Like, those are kind of the three main pillars. Like, when I explain governance to, layman person, like, those are the three things that you're really looking at. And I think the structures that have been, the structures and process are typically looked at in a negative light because it slows things down, right? And I think there's there's probably a lot of innovation,
especially in a larger company, I would think, like a Fortune 500, right?
It's
just red tape. It's like, why?
We say things like, oh, you can like govern or secure yourself out of business. Right, you literally could.
Ooh, I never heard that. That makes a lot of sense.
And that there's a truth to that.
Yeah.
I deal with it on small business too, right? I've dealt with a Microsoft managed service provider that didn't want to relinquish control of something. There was some governance checkbox around using one of the LLMs, and they wanted to like waive all liability. Like we get in these weird like gatekeeping type of scenarios.
It's just human politics, isn't it?
With the right intent and the right reasons, but we literally had to like pivot our AI strategy because we're not going to unravel, right? So, and I think we see a lot of that, right? New tools, new shiny tools, things like that, to kind of almost circumvent some of the governance. And so that'll have repercussions also. But we have to figure out how to really, because this is really important stuff. And so I think we'll see, and you see it online a little bit, right? Around like data governance and, you know, garbage in, garbage, like all the things that have existed, but you see an amplification of this once again. Because,
but it's the same theme coming back around. In the sense it's nothing new, right?
What's old is new.
Yeah. And I love that part of it, because then it's like, oh, AI is not, in that context, it's not some crazy new thing. It's the same old challenges. Yeah.
Well, yeah. We'll see like the same thing. We're all honed in right now on, you know, dashboards and like, how do we answer basic questions with our data using an LLM, right? Back to the spreadsheet. I take my spreadsheet, I throw it in the LLM. It builds me a beautiful descriptive statistics overview of my company. Magic.
And so let's come back to that. So I want to hit two things, and then I wanted to talk about your DataTools Pro thing.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get some good time on that. First thing I want to come back on is come back to the semantic model. I think we agree it matters. You understand more why. I'm just like, okay, I know it matters. I need to build one out. But talk to me about the difference between it. And here's coming back to the mid-market ERP consultant. A lot of people right now are thinking that the MCP server is all they need. And so like, I'll come to Acumatica specifically because that's what I know the best. We don't have the MCP server yet. It might be coming in the fall, might be coming next spring. But I think a lot of people are just thinking, oh, as soon as I have that, I'm good. I don't think that's the case. I think MCP server is just, okay, now AI can access the data securely, but we're still talking about more of a raw form, and we're not talking about the semantic model. What's your take on that? So like for the ERP consultant, why should you care about a semantic model? What I think is going to happen is the ERP consultants are going to try the MCP server, and they're going to find out it's not enough. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if the MCP is just kind of accessing raw data, I mean, at that point, you're automating, you're just like removing the UI at that point.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's really, when you use an MCP to access like a transactional system of any type, you're really just setting it up where you just don't need to use the UI. Like that's really the only value. And you can ask for things. There's a real value in time savings, right? If I have to click through 5 screens,
sure.
Or it's like the mental gymnastics I have to do where I have to like go to one screen, grab some information, go to another module, grab some other information, and I got to like stitch that together or do like laborious data entry. The MCP could add a lot of value.
But I still need that definition of my metrics. And the MCP is not going to, I don't think it's going to give us that.
No. I think if you're talking now, if there's an MCP, and this is lack of familiarity from a systems perspective, but if there's like a report aggregator or a mart, like a data mart or something that's built in, then sure. But if you're talking about an MCP,
and actually we might be getting there. But either way, you're going to need that semantic model level of thinking in order to serve that up to the MCP server. Yeah, the MCP server on its own, I don't think it's going to deliver the magic.
So what will you guys end up probably doing? A lot of folks will build basically their own flavor of a semantic layer, and it'll be a CSV file, it'll be a markdown file, whatever the format, doesn't matter. But you'll end up producing, right? Because the MCP will have its own basic semantics, right? Like you'll have plain English, like there's a ERP data dictionary.
Yeah, we're coming back to like just the definitions of the columns and the tables. Though.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that kind of a level. Yeah.
And hopefully when they deliver it, they'll deliver it in a way to where that MCP has some of that context in there. But ultimately, what you guys will end up doing is you'll build your own glossaries, your own files that
for each business,
for each business that applies the context, and that in itself is a semantic layer. I mean,
once we explained it in Excel terms, it really removed a lot of the mystery. I like that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be super fancy.
No.
Then talk to me also. So the second thing I want to ask is just relationship between semantic model or semantic layer and business process documentation. So if we go with this two sides of the same coin, reporting and process, and we talk about putting more description into the reporting layer, and then we also talk about it sort of starts to feel like instead of just the transactional workflow to get the transaction into the system, we need to kind of have a similar path back out. Do you see, I'm pretty big on business process documentation. I've always been bullish on that, but most people don't care about it. It's like a task no one wants to do. I think it becomes a lot more important in the age of AI. But where I'm going with this is talk to me about, do you see a business process documentation effort kind of living in its own world, like its own mart in a sense, and the semantic layer being its own thing? You need to learn both because they totally overlap. But from a technical architecture capture standpoint, do you see them becoming one master document, or is it kind of two different things?
No, I think if you merge all that stuff together, it just becomes noise, frankly.
So you do see it as two different worlds.
I see it as two different things, and they can be connected. There could be a common, whether it's, you don't need a key, right? Like you don't need a, you don't have to like normalize everything.
But it's context in a sense. This is context for this, and this is context for this.
So correct.
In your head.
It could be a simple taxonomy that, like a simple like label that connects these two things.
Yeah.
But the desire to kind of throw everything into one giant vat and then like point AI at it doesn't work, right?
But I think that's the way a lot of people think. And that's where like I come back to the MCP servers, like, oh, once we have that, the AI has access to everything and we're good to go. Yeah.
No. And that's where a lot of folks are kind of like false hope and kind of feel like they've been let down on Microsoft, right? Like Microsoft had like Copilot, just like pointed at your SharePoint, and it's just going to go through all your documents. And ultimately with time, it's going to like learn how to like work like one of your employees.
Yeah. It maybe someday, but we're getting into sci-fi stuff.
It's so, at the end of the day, it goes back to the objective function, right? Like if the function is to track those events that we talked about, right? Through your business process, if you're tracking events, right? If the objective is to understand a metric, so like new customer, like revenue, like new customer acquisition, right? If your objective function is to understand and go backwards to know like, hey, the reason my customer acquisition is down is because we don't have enough supply. And the objective is to go and figure out where there's maybe a kink in the hose or in the flow. That's where connecting those dots may be useful. But I can tell you with certainty that the person responsible whose incentive is to grow customer acquisition or grow buyers, like we talked about, they, and therefore the tools and systems and people and AI don't care about the process documentation. And even if you gave the magical capacity to connect those two dots, is how something in the process actually predictive to help you grow your customers?
So you're not as bullish on the process documentation, it sounds like. Well, in the sense of really documenting it instead of just sort of having conversations and understanding it.
Oh, so if we remove like growing revenue, if my objective function is to optimize is to optimize delivery and my supply chain, that process documentation is everything.
Well, I guess I'm not even thinking about it from the like Lean Six Sigma improvement standpoint. I'm thinking of it more of treating like AI like a new hire in your organization and needing it to teach how your business works. So it's sort of just two completely different contexts, and there's no key between the semantic layer and the business process documentation. But if you provide both to the AI, that could be pretty powerful. What do you think?
It has the potential, but I look at it two ways. There's how does the business work and operate, and then how do we manage the business are directly related, correlated, but they really are two different activities.
And there's more value over here, right? I mean, in terms of the metrics and stuff, I think there's more. Well, if I were to put it this way, if I were a consultant, I'd probably want to go here. I'm going to be able to have a better billable rate.
It depends. I mean, it depends on the business, right? I mean, think of it this way. If you're like I like Netflix, we all use Netflix, right? If somebody is saying, hey, we need to increase our retention rate of Netflix, because we're all Netflix users, right? If we need to increase our retention rate, ultimately, you are going to have to connect the dots around like, how does the recommendations engine in Netflix work? Like, what are we serving up to people? What's the engagement? Like, that's like, you need to understand how that process works and how they collect all of our, like every button press, every detail we look at, like all of these things are predictive, and understanding how that machinery works directly correlates, right?
It kind of, I think it goes back to earlier when you're talking about either I need more customers or I need more product. I have enough customers, I just can't ship fast enough. It's sort of a similar idea.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Both roles, like both things need to happen, and both groups and ultimately AI agents need some common ground to communicate with each other. And I think there's one school of thought is that you just throw everything into a vat and let the machine run and evaluate everything that, like anything and every signal that happens, and tease out. But and that's where you get into like ontology map, like it.
And maybe that's the general AI Terminator stuff that might come. Who knows? But it's not there now.
But if you're talking about a small and medium enterprise, right? The idea of like you're not going to have Palantir come in and unleash $5 million worth of consulting for 6 weeks to tell you how things fit together in your company.
I like that.
Right.
I like that.
So it goes back to, with all of this AI stuff, it's figuring out where you're going to get the most bang for the buck. Where are you going to get the highest impact, and or where's the highest degree of pain of problems in your company? If it is growing customers, in my case, there was a retention problem that directly impacts risk and directly impacts profit, right? So like that was a problem that we honed in on and made the investment to create these assets. And so, I'll never come on one of these video and like say like, oh, the number one recommended advice is like start simple. But usually you have to start somewhere, and you have to start simple. And I always recommend starting in an area of your business where like you have the most pain and the highest impact if you fix that problem. And it could be in your business process could be literally crippling you, how you built it. And that may be where all of that brain power needs to go. Or it could be on, back to that revenue and customer acquisition. It could be on your customer acquisition, and they maybe are related, but you don't have to throw everything at AI hoping and figuring out that it's going to have a light bulb moment, because it's just not.
I love that. I love that. Real talk from someone who's doing it on the ground, including having a conversation in traffic with something and having a good result. I don't think we talked about that. Like, you had a good result from that hour-long drive yesterday, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, back to like,
it actually worked.
What's the result? I sent that text message, right? And the executive like went back and prepared like the formal recommendation that will like kind of go down as here's what we're going to do. And now once again, we're using the LLM now to craft the Word document with all of that work in context. And so now we're crafting the Word document, and I'm going back, like wearing my hat as the like AI guy. I'm just having the same agent that I used to go back and forth and do analysis to now evaluate the document to make sure everything in there, like just a sanity check to make sure all the figures and facts line up. So it's just,
and you're checking it also, right? I mean, it's kind of both. You're like, you're working together with it, not just sort of pawning it off on the agent. Or
no, I mean, I for something this important, I go back and I actually look, right? Because I have the logs.
Yeah.
So I can go back and say, hey, what query did we run?
That goes back to the logs. Yeah.
Which query did we actually run?
Yeah.
And did we, pull this the right way? But it's all about like that gating and narrowing of focus and scope. And back to the gig, the gig is not just to like give it access and see what it comes up with.
Yeah.
It's using the knowledge that you've already accumulated and built up and all the data work that's already happened and use that as scaffolding to build on top of.
All right, quick time check. 11:42.
How long have we been going?
Hour 42.
Holy shit.
I think you might have had something at the top of the hour that you got to get to.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about DataTools Pro. So I've got it on the screen there, DataToolsPro.com. With this whole semantic model endeavor, you built something because you're in the trenches. And I think it's interesting for the VAR community, the ERP consultants, because they go into a business. I think, well, you can describe it your own way, but I think you can go into a business and have them, tell me what's important to you. But a really good consultant can go into a business and tell them what should be important to them. And is that sort of what talk to us about what the genesis of it and what it does and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I approach this from not necessarily from an ERP, but from a kind of go-to-market CRM customer management. Like that was my entry point. But it would work just as well for an ERP, right? Oh yeah, I mean, we could apply it to an ERP, right? And so the idea is exactly what you said. As a consultant, you can go in and you sit down and you say, hey, what are the things that are causing the most pain? And, okay, that's great. I have a list of challenges and initiatives or things that you're working on as an enterprise. Let's figure out if I remove that pain, where are we going to get the best yield or impact? Like if we solve these challenges, like that's fundamentally what you're doing as a consultant. And the next question that, you should have is if we fix this problem, like how are we going to measure that it worked? Like, what are you measuring? What are your metrics? Back to everyone measures revenue, but like, are we measuring churn? Are we there has to be an incentive, right? And metrics really do like should snap to some type of incentive. And so the idea is that like, rather you can go in and have that conversation and kind of do it top down. Now, the problem is that it's easy to do with an executive or a stakeholder, but ultimately, if that is all you come to the table with, now you have to go do the reconnaissance work. And the reconnaissance work is figuring out what metrics they track, what are the reports, what systems does it connect to? There's this like whole discovery. And discovery, in my experience, could take weeks. For big enterprise, it's months. Yeah. Historically, it was quarters before you even figure out how are we even going to solve this thing? And so I looked at the problem both ways. I looked at it as a consultant, but I looked at it as an employee or as a leader, where if I need to onboard a consultant or I need to onboard an employee, I need to like quickly explain how are you going to onboard an AI agent? Yeah. Or now an AI agent, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, how do I explain this is how we manage our business, not how we run it, not our processes and sub-processes, but like, here is like how we steer this ship. And these are the key metrics or KPIs or OKR, whatever it is. Like, here's the things that are important. Here's what we track. And here's where we track those things. Now, when I was leading analytics, I had all that stuff. It was like natural because of all those years of consulting. As a consultant, you go in and you rarely see a company that like has it all together and packaged. Otherwise, frankly, what do they need me for, right? If everything's running smoothly, you probably don't need the consultant in the first place. So I built DataTools originally to shortcut that onboarding. And so what that means is I point the tech to the CRM. I automatically extract all of the reports and dashboards being used. I determine what's actually in use. And I basically reverse engineer the metrics based on all of that curation work and preparation that's already happened. And then from that, I can then get back to the process. Then I can start to map out, hey, here's where the data comes from. Here's how things are formulated. But at a surface level, I can inference and understand what are the actual metrics, what are the drivers that are being monitored today. And so before I have that executive meeting, right, I do these things in parallel. I need to have that, what is your pain, what's the impact? But before I even do that, back to your statement, is like step one is just give me access. Like give me access and I'll go in, I'll do my magic. And that way,
reconnaissance. I thought that was a good word for it. Yeah.
Right. That way, when I'm showing up to the meeting, I've already got the vernacular, what your revenue growth, what activation really means. And so I can already start to discover some of these, I call them semantic disconnects, the like 20 flavors of revenue. I've already figured out all 20 flavors. And oh, you look at that dashboard. Oh, well, I already know that flavor of revenue is different than these other 18 flavors, right? I've had to be the guy that comes in and explains the measurement that is responsible for like guiding the ship is off by millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's been wrong forever.
Yeah.
But consistency sometimes wins over correctness.
Sure.
And I understand that.
Sure.
But these are the kind of problems that companies have where this reconnaissance work really kind of helps.
So super helpful for like an ERP consultant landing in a new place. You built it initially for the initial reconnaissance. Yeah. Did you found that, or have you found that it also becomes an ongoing asset?
Yeah.
And because it doesn't live anywhere else? So yeah, talk to me about that part.
Yeah. So it's great for like building is always easy, right? Building and creating something from nothing is typically the easy part. But then it's like that ongoing monitoring. When it comes to building semantic layers, building glossaries, building documentation, the minute you publish that documentation, as soon as something changes, the documentation is potentially wrong, right? And there's a lot of principles. There's a lot of like in software development and even change management and tracking change, what changes over time. That ongoing monitoring of what changed, who changed it, and what's the impact of that change is the obvious play once you do the reconnaissance. So when it comes to metrics, the continuous scanning of what's changing, you add a new product, you add a new customer, you make an acquisition, you're having to constantly commingle all these different lenses and versions of, in my case, metrics. So that's where it's a very, very difficult, challenging problem to solve that historically hasn't panned out very well. But when now the reason it's come up and it's become so important is that if you're not building dashboards and reports and like curating, and now you're unleashing AI on the same underlying structures and data, you need to be able to govern and make sure that the definitions that they have are constantly up to date.
So does DataTools Pro can it act as your semantic layer for AI? Maybe not this version. Is that where you're headed with it?
Not in the way that we look at data semantics.
Yeah, you didn't talk about business semantics.
So
is it more of the business semantics?
So I look at it more as like in the practice of like curating knowledge, curating like I call it a metrics glossary.
Mm-hmm.
We have business glossary, which is like a glossary of terminology, the vernacular of your business, right? That's the way that I've looked at it and how I've used it over the last several years.
But is it the glossary with my business glasses on? Maybe not the data glasses on? Is it looking at it from the side of the business more?
It's looking at it from the side of the business more.
It is, okay.
100%. It's at some point, somebody somewhere has to translate these underlying tools and systems up to business. And that's what business intelligence has been doing for the last however many years. Like the dashboard, the report, the spreadsheet. That is the final like curation layer for consumption.
The PowerPoint, yeah.
The PowerPoint, right? That's like the final. And so, PowerPoint is the like uncharted frontier of that. But from a systems perspective, translating and reverse engineering that curation work that's happened, because ultimately that needs to be fed into these AI systems, right? Context, right? We talk about context. It's situational awareness, it's organizational awareness, but it is also some awareness of the underlying systems and where things originate from.
Because it's got to be able to go do the calculation on the fly.
Yeah. If you're talking about using
otherwise
AI,
it's just context for the AI.
Correct.
And so right now it seems like it's more of a tool to define it from a business level. Do you think DataTools Pro evolves into becoming an actual semantic model that knows how to go get the data as well?
I don't know. Right now, I use it as part of the onboarding. I use it part of as quality assurance. So, for example, if I have this metrics glossary that I know is up to date, and it's constantly being curated and updated, and it's governed, every time I make an update to my semantic layer, my data semantic layer in my BI system,
okay,
I am like doing a check for all of my metrics.
Okay.
So I have a 1-to-1 between metrics, and I'm looking, does this exist in my metric? In other words, is this important from a business perspective?
Okay. From a top down.
From a top down
connection. Yeah. Okay.
And so I always say,
and so there could be holes. There could be stuff important in the business that there's no data for it yet. That'd be fine.
Correct.
And that's the advantage of looking at it business semantics and not just looking at it data semantics, because data semantics, you're limited to the data you have. Here, you're more strategic looking at it from the business. I like that.
And then the other part is like from a business perspective, like removing systems and process and everything. If I'm a business person and I need information to do my job, understanding the business perspective, how they measure revenue or churn, right? Back to like multiple versions of revenue. You need to encapsulate that stuff somewhere.
And we talked about the easiest places to fire up a tab on an Excel file, but this is a better version of that.
This 100%. So
interesting.
In a data semantic layer, you want to get to one canonical definition of revenue. Like we need that one definition because it needs to join and link, and we need to track the lineage all the way back to its origin.
Techie.
In a business context, two people from two different departments or two different parts of an organization both have the same definition of revenue, but that definition can be expressed in two completely different ways in two different systems. And I'm less concerned about reconciling them and more concerned about explaining the difference between the two in real time.
Yeah.
Where that semantic disconnect happens.
Yeah.
And so I think tech folks are like, oh, we need to solve this thing all the way back.
We need to write the formula that does the black and white. Yeah.
And in my perspective, is it goes back to where's the semantic disconnect actually happen?
Yeah.
Where does the pain happen? And it's more the misunderstanding of the meaning of these things. We always jump to, oh, the data's wrong. No, two people can show up to the same meeting with the same data from the same data source and report even.
Yeah.
And then both be right, yet simultaneously be wrong.
And I think you were telling me a big part of it is time.
And time is the number one offender, right? Two people can pull the same report at two different hours of the day.
Yeah.
and argue about it in a meeting for 30 minutes.
Yep, I've been in those meetings.
Right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I think that's where
and had to trace it back.
Yeah. And ultimately, that's where AI can be incredibly helpful. It's just creating that understanding, recognizing where semantic disconnects happen at all layers, not just in the systems or in the data semantics, but it's like the business semantics that can break down and the understanding and where to go look for information. That's where it comes back to governance. And so those are the kind of problems I'm solving. It's not that I've fully solved it, but I've certainly improved quality of life when it comes to onboarding and monitoring and keeping track of this stuff and systemizing it. So that's the
DataTools Pro version 1. When did you have version 1 out?
Oh, I released the first version of this thing in like 2023.
So you've been working on this for a few years.
And yeah, I mean, I actually stopped shipping updates about 18 months ago. And we did that because we started bottom up, back to like we have the metrics layer, and then we're digging down into like where does the data come from. And we found it was more effective to go the other way with it. It's like, hey, here's my metrics. What is the initiative back to the pain? What is the strategic impact of these things? And it resonated more, and maybe it could change because of everything that's happened in AI, but it resonated more with a business audience than it did a technical audience.
That it does from my standpoint as well. That's what interests me about it. To me, I don't know. We talked about entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. Like there's a bunch of how to run a business philosophies out there, but it's a really popular one. I like that it came out of Detroit, Michigan. So it's, kind of like middle America, real feel and real simple.
Yep.
And so anyways, a lot of it just comes down to associating it with what that top level strategy is. But you got to know what that is, right? So no, that resonates with me. That's what made me interested in it.
Yeah. And with the technical folks, it's like, hey, look, in my world and in my crazy world, like a business metric has a function, not a key. Meaning that like there's a function and an outcome and an objective that is tied to the metric. And I'm less obsessed with what is the unique key or what I need to join or how do I need to like trace the lineage, right? Those things are super important. You need all of those things. But that's where I separate the data semantics from business semantics. And there's a whole world, and I recognize there's a whole world and discipline and standards and whatever related to capturing knowledge and knowledge management.
This is where the ontology phrase comes in.
Yeah. Ontology and knowledge graphs and the collection and distribution. And I'm in the learner seat in that regard every single day, but I'm coming at this purely from a analytics and BI perspective. So it's like the best ideas usually come from like cross-breed of experiences.
Yeah, and you've got that boots on the ground experience side too. A lot of times the big debates mainly come out of like an academic circles, but you're doing it day in and day out.
Yeah, and that's why I stopped shipping, right? It's like, I'm on the ground building this stuff. It's like, I don't really care. I approach it like I care for solving the problem and the pain, and it's a big problem. And if I do that, then I'll worry about like, how am I going to get a 10,000 or 20,000 or 100,000 people to use it. I started with version 1 of how do I get 10,000 people to use my tools as like a software mind, like or a go-to-market like software entrepreneur like focus. And over the last like 18 months, I've just been, hey, can I really solve this problem of like monitoring and managing semantic disconnects?
So if there's any mid-market ERP consultants out there who'd like to give DataTools Pro a try on their clients,
hit me up.
They could reach out to you. Awesome.
Yeah, hit me up.
I'll put that in the related links, your contact info. Respecting your time here, we're at 12 o'clock.
It's a marathon. I can talk about this all day. And
I could too.
What folks don't understand is we are in the summertime in a, like you'll probably see the glow if anyone
I'm surprised I'm not sweating more. It's not too bad.
Like it is probably 90 degrees in this space.
And so, I love it.
We're glowing. We're working up a sweat.
Well, Ryan, thank you for a lot of good. One big main thing I want to make sure you didn't have like a meeting at 12, did you?
Oh, I'm sure. That's
Yeah. Well, one big reason why I like doing the live broadcast is it dumps out on YouTube, and then the LLMs get trained on this kind of stuff. And I like that, just using this as an entry point for kind of human knowledge contribution and talking to people like you who know what they're doing in their space. And if no one even listens to it, I think the LLMs pick it up eventually. And then I use it too. I go back and ask the Gemini built into YouTube, or where did we talk about this? So anyway, super helpful for me.
For anyone that did watch this whole thing and stick it out, and I am long-winded, please reach out and connect with me. But I know we're going to slice and dice this into all kinds of short form nuggets.
We'll do some clip stuff as well out of it. Yeah,
we'll do clips and hopefully there's a handful of nuggets on there. But for anyone that did stick it out, thank you. Appreciate it. And I thank you for
thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it. Thanks for hosting in your little space here.
Yeah.
My first time doing one in person, I think. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Well, episode it'll be erpseal.com/episode 182 for Ryan's contact info. You can hit him up there. I'll probably do your LinkedIn profile and your email if that's okay.
Yep. And reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out for anybody out there.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
No problem.
Gonna end it by scrolling up here. My unofficial end. Catch you next time.